Hello and welcome to the Human Side of Real Estate podcast. My name is Mark Toomey. I'm managing partner of Tata HRC, which is a boutique real estate headhunting company based in Warsaw, Poland. My guest today is Soren Rodian Olsen from Logicenters, which is a business line of Scandinavian investor Nrep here in Poland. Soren, lovely to see you. Thank you very much for coming in and doing this. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm after holidays, so I feel quite relaxed and energized. And now I think from the beginning of next week, my Scandinavian colleagues will come back from their bit longer holiday.
I was going to say that to you because I don't know if you noticed, because I lived in Finland for a year before I came to Poland. And although the Finns don't consider themselves as Scandinavians, but one thing that amazed me there was they just take a month off.
Yes.
It's like everybody takes just a solid month off, out of office for a whole month, and it's like, okay, that's it.
Right. Not all do, and Denmark is probably a bit different, but definitely the Finns and the Swedes, at least the ones that I work closely with, they're gone for 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah.
And it links into most of them having smaller kids and the school holidays as well, and a lot of them, they actually don't travel abroad. They actually go to their houses in the countryside or lake districts.
Yeah, and that was the other thing I noticed is very few of them actually go abroad. They all go to their in Finland they call them the mokis.
That's because the weather's so good in Scandinavia.
You love mosquitoes. So let's jump into this. So first thing I wanted to ask you is, I'm always curious because obviously being an expat here in Poland, and I've been here for almost 20 years myself, and I'm always kind of curious to hear, I suppose, the journey stories of other expats, and particularly guys like yourself who've been here because you've been here, what,
22 years.
22 years, so that is 2002.
Correct.
Yeah. So, when we look at coming to Poland at that time, obviously Poland is not the Poland that it is today. So I'm very curious to see what was the decision-making factor for you or how did you end up in Poland? That's more to the point.
Yes, I think it had to do with two things. First of all, I knew Warsaw already because I had a stint as a kind of a very, very young person in the beginning of my career, spending 6 months in on a project in Warsaw in 1992. So that goes way back. So I actually already knew the city quite well. Also, my wife at the time, who is half Swedish, half Polish, had parents that had moved from Sweden back to Warsaw. So I was used to traveling to Warsaw and visiting the city. So it I could get into a car and maneuver around, and I knew the city quite well. So it was not something strange or very alien to me. But the main reason really was that at that time I was living and working in London. I worked for a subsidiary within the Swissair Group, and I was looking for a new and different career opportunity and start to speak to some people in my network. And one of the people I spoke to, who later on became a huge influence of who I am today as a professional, is an Austrian person called Alexander Picker, who was a board member of a newly merged bank in Poland between the subsidiary owned by Bank Austria and the subsidiary owned by Hypovereinsbank, the German large bank. And in their post-merger, they were looking for somebody to help them managing their cost base better. 2001 and 2002 were very difficult years for Poland's economy, very high unemployment rate and huge inflation. And one talk led to another talk, led to meeting other members of the management board of that bank. And in the end, it led to my decision to change country, career and job at the same time.
Yeah.
And relocating from London to Warsaw.
Because you mentioned, and that was something I wasn't aware of, because you mentioned you had started your career in the airline industry.
Correct.
So I'm kind of curious to know how you got from the airline industry to the real estate industry, because that seems like
with a bump in the road called banking.
Yeah.
No, I started my career in Copenhagen, working for Scandinavian Airlines. And the the division in which I worked then was later on sold to Swissair Group. So my journey actually went from Copenhagen to Zurich, where I spent 3.5 years in the head office of Swissair Group. And then as part of my professional development and getting to understand operations better, I then relocated from Zurich to London, but still within the same group of companies, and spent 4 years in London. And that was kind of the first part of my career, which is kind of called the airline part. Which kind of shaped me, and also that was where I gained my first experiences as a line manager and being responsible for other people. And then, as I said before, Swissair went through difficult times, and I was looking for actually trying to do something differently in another industry. I was also toying with the idea of becoming a consultant with a focus on supply chain and cost management. But then in the end, through my network and accidentally meeting this Austrian guy, I ended up taking a job in a bank. And my parents completely not understand how that could happen. My family has been working within the airline industry. My brother still does for many years.
Okay.
So they're like, "What do you're not a banker? So what do you plan to do in the bank?" Well, I'm not going to be a banker, but I'm going to have this responsibility to help the bank curb its costs. And that was how I ended up in Poland, and I actually ended up launching a kind of a career within the banking industry in Poland. And I spent overall some 6 years in banking in Poland. First 4 years with Bank BPH, and then later on another 2 years with Bank, which today is known as mBank.
Yeah. Okay. So now I have this picture in my mind that, every time you start a management meeting now with your team, the first thing you do is point out where the emergency exits are.
Yes, exactly. And the lavatories.
So coming to Poland, and I know I'm kind of rolling back the years here, but was there any? And I know you had been here a few times with your partner at the time, but were there any culture shocks that you remember at the time, or?
This may come as a surprise to you. So when I lived in the UK, I obviously got to meet a lot of different type of Polish people. And then I came to Poland and I got to work in a quite large corporate environment. And I met Poles who were so brilliant, so smart, and so inspiring. A bit different to what I actually had experienced in meeting Poles in the UK. So it was a complete reverse experience of, wow, this is amazing, and these people are so smart. I can learn from them, and well, maybe they can also learn a little bit from me. So it was kind of maybe different to what many expats have experienced, that they came to Poland and, oh, this is not working and this is different, and the food is so and so. I knew the food. I had sort of toyed a little bit with the language already, and then I get to meet these brilliant people in Bank BPH, and many of them are still active in the banking sector. And sort of, I'm very proud to still have in contact to some of them. So that was actually probably the number one biggest surprise, and this is kind of getting to know Polish people and Polish professionals in a completely different way.
If I think about one of my first experiences here, and I before I moved here, I had done a year in Finland, but I'd also done almost 5 years in Czech Republic. So I was familiar to the region.
Yes.
But one of the things that when I came here in 2006, one of the things that struck me immediately was, there was a sense here that obviously, going back to kind of communistic times, but there was a sense here that the Poles had felt that they had been held back for many, many years, 50 years, from their economic development, personal development, professional development, all of that. And now they were playing catch up. And that was one of the first things I really noticed. It was like just how eager people were to improve, to improve themselves, to improve the economy, to improve the country, and to catch up with Western Europe, because I think they always felt that we should have been there.
Yes, I totally agree with you, and I think it's there are not many countries that I know of where you have this can-do mentality. I always say that every Pole walks around with an entrepreneur in his or her stomach. If they had the means and the opportunity to start their own business, they would do so, and that's very different to the culture that you and I come from. So that was also very inspiring. Probably the one thing that was difficult for me in the beginning, having lived a few years in London, was there were no bookshops.
Yeah.
Well, of course, there were books. Well, first of all, there were not many Polish bookshops. Never has been. And there were, at that time, no bookshops with books in English. So, and loving...
It's still the case.
Loving bookshops in London, although they are sort of becoming less and less. That was the one thing that I missed the most. Shortly after moving here.
Pre-Amazon days when you could just click them.
Exactly.
But I actually remember that as well. When my kids were younger, I was looking for English books to buy them, and I could never find any. I had to bring them back from Ireland. One thing I want to ask, and again, I'm drawing on my experiences here, and I'm kind of just curious to see how your own experiences relate to that. But after 22 years here, do you feel that you feel more connected to Poland and Poland's culture and do you feel that as each year goes by, you're kind of losing a little bit of your own Danish identity?
That's a very good question. I think a very short answer is no, I have not lost any of my Scandinavian or Danish identity. I feel very Scandinavian at heart. I'm very proud of being Scandinavian. I have raised my children in a Scandinavian way, if you like, in terms of parenting and allowing them freedom to explore. But at the same time, obviously, I live in another country, and I very much respect the culture and the habits of people and the country it itself. So it's true that when you spend so many years in a country that is different to your own country, well, first of all, you get to look at your own people, your own country in a different way, sort of the outside in, and you get to laugh a little bit more at yourself, which I think is very healthy. And then secondly, you also feel that you become a bit part of the journey of Poland in Europe. And I obviously arrived before Poland became member of EU, and then came EU, and then came a lot of other things, including investments into Poland that's actually enabled Poland to develop immensely, both in terms of infrastructure, in terms of buildings, in terms of opportunities for people, both in Poland and outside of Poland. Yeah. So that, in that sense, my plan was to spend 3 or 4 years in Warsaw.
I think all of us had that plan.
And I had like 3 years, 3 years there, 4 years the next place. Okay, I'll do Warsaw for 3 or 4 years, and then fast forward, I'm in my 6th job since I arrived in Poland, and again I'm doing something different to what I did before. So it's been a very, very rewarding journey, both personally and professionally.
My wife pointed out something to me recently, because I every time I refer to Ireland, until she pointed it out to me, I had referred to it as going home.
Yes.
And she's like, "You've been here for almost 20 years. This is your home." Yes. I was like, "You're right." But it's just an unconscious thing and a habit of saying, "Well, I'm going home to Ireland."
Yes. And then you probably experience the same thing as me, that you go back home and then something has changed, something is new, and you feel like almost like a tourist in your own country.
Absolutely. And because you mentioned, and again, I'm curious to see your experiences with this and how to compare with mine. Because you mentioned raising your kids as well in a Danish way, but you're obviously, I know you're a proud Dane. You're proud of the history, of the culture, of the heritage. So with your kids growing up here in Poland, how do you make sure that they get a bit of that? They get to learn and understand the Danish heritage and culture.
So they were born in Poland, and not surprisingly, the first language they learned was Polish. But I always spoke Danish to them from the beginning, almost like imposing it on them. And then they would speak, when they were very young, they would speak Polish back to me, and I can understand that. So that was fine. And I also helped them with pronunciations and so on. But I've always been very determined that they will only learn Danish from one person, and that's me. And I wanted them to be able to converse with their grandparents back in Denmark. I wanted them to have the choice of if they would decide to move to Denmark to study or whatever at some stage, they would have the language to take with them. So that's one part, and the other part is that I sort of alternate between summer holidays somewhere in Europe and some holidays in Denmark. Right. So we do spend some holidays in Denmark, and every other year we also spend Christmas in Copenhagen, where I come from, together with my brother's family. And then over the past, I think, 5 to 6 years, I've actually sent them on summer school in Denmark every year. It's 3 weeks. It's organized by an organization that is focused on Danish or part Danish children living outside of Denmark. And they spend the 3 weeks both doing schoolwork, working on the Danish language capabilities. Kids are split into what kind of level their language skills are at. There's focus on the food, on the culture, on the history, heritage. There are site visits to various known places in Denmark. So they get that kind of what I call sort of a Denmark injection once a year. Now they are getting to an age where probably they will not continue to do that. But that has been very rewarding. And I also see when they come back from that, there's like their relationship to Denmark is different, and they also more in touch with the language, and they feel like they can command it better. I mean, they speak, but reading and writing has been difficult, and they have certainly become much better at that.
Yeah, no, very, very similar to mine, and we have there's a lot of Irish mythology and legends, and I was reading all those books to them when they were kids, and now that they're older, we'll spend more time there. We'll do the historical sites, and also remember that story. Well, that happened here, and so
and this was where the Danish Vikings came and invaded us.
We're probably related in some way. So listen, coming back to that journey from airlines to banking to real estate, and obviously three very banking and real estate aren't very different, but airlines obviously are. But I'm kind of curious then to see, have you noticed any kind of transferable skills that have kind of stayed with you even from the early part of your career that you've been able to kind of take with you over to?
Yes, it's. I haven't sat down and thought about, okay, these are exactly the skills that I was able to take with me. But clearly, there has been skills that I could take with me, and I think my people management skills and my leadership skills certainly has been something that I have seen different people, different nationalities in different industries. They actually quite liked my style, which is a sort of very open, honest style, and also leave people to get on with it themselves. So that is certainly one skill.
And do you think the style? Would you say that's you've taken that style? It's a more Danish style of leadership, or is this just something that you've developed yourself?
Absolutely. I think when I had to give an example, when I started working in the bank in Poland. A lot of Polish colleagues instantly liked me because, I was not Polish, so it was a bit sort of, I was different, but I was not the German or the Austrian expatriate either. I was something in between, and they couldn't quite figure it out. And then when they started to talk to me, and also the people who were working for me in the organization, so I look, you get on with it, you manage, and if you have any problems, you come to me, and my door's always open. And they were kind of, wow, so I don't need to ask you for everything. No, you don't need to ask. I mean, obviously, I like people to earn my trust. And in most cases, most experiences I've had in Poland, people have earned my trust. As I said, I've had very, very positive experience working with the Polish people here.
And that was something that we kind of touched on earlier as well. And in terms of the Danish leadership, I suppose Danish corporate culture.
Yes.
And now that you're back with a Scandinavian company with Nrep, and obviously in Poland, so how do you think that the Polish will feel about the Danish corporate culture in Poland?
So we have first of all, Nrep has a very particular culture and set of values, which are very appealing to me, and those were one of many things that made me take the decision to leave a very good job in a very good company with very good colleagues and joined Nrep exactly 3 years ago. I think that a lot of Polish people, they have not too much exposure or experience in working with Scandinavian companies. Of course, we have some large corporates present in Poland, but Scandinavian real estate investors really is something that has only taken off over the past 4 to 5 years, to be honest. I remember back when I embarked on my journey into real estate, there were literally no Scandinavian real estate investors present in the market. So to come back to your question, I think it's been a journey for my Polish colleagues. Let me put it in that way. Scandinavians generally are very, very easygoing, and they have a huge distance to themselves, and they can laugh at themselves and make fun of themselves, which is unusual in Polish culture. So that's been different. And then the very specific values of Nrep, which are focusing on trust and care and making a difference in the world, is also something that's been sort of a new thing to my Polish colleagues, and Nrep in Poland. I am the only Scandinavian person working there, and the rest of my colleagues are Polish. So it's been I think it's been a very interesting journey for my Polish colleagues to actually adapt and get to learn and understand the Scandinavian style.
Well, definitely very something new for them as well. You know, as you said, there aren't, you know, with the exception of Skanska, maybe there aren't that many Scandinavian companies, investors, real estate investors in Poland.
That's correct. I mean, over the past years, you've seen more coming in, and Heimstaden is also a good example of that. There are not many Scandinavian investors, and Nrep, when they came into the Polish market, I think some 4 years ago, I mean, nobody had ever heard of them. Yeah. And I was like, that's strange. Even I had not heard of them. And they were, for some time, we were joking that they're sort of the best kept real estate secret from Scandinavia, because they do, I mean, they are the largest real estate investor in the Nordics, but very few had heard about them outside the Nordics.
So another thing I'm curious about, because before you joined Nrep, you spent a number of years with Cushman.
Yes.
And before you joined Cushman, I remember you had done a period with Aberdeen.
Correct.
So you went from investor to agency, and then back to investor. So I'm kind of curious to know, you know, if we're talking about leadership style, what are the differences in the leadership style that you need to produce between working for somebody like Cushman, an agency like Cushman, and then working for an investor, and regardless if you're Scandinavian or not. But just, I'm kind of curious to know what are the main kind of differences you feel between those agency and investor.
I mean, first of all, probably the main difference between investor or what we call client side and the advisor is that on the advisor side, it's a very fast-paced environment. With a lot of revenue pressure, and literally all of the international real estate advisors are American, maybe with the exception of Savills and Knight Frank, who are still smaller in Poland and in other markets, but it is very sort of corporate, and it's very fast paced, and it's not probably fair to say that the pace is different. On the investor side, and you take a more, at least the investors I worked for, which were like Anglo-German and now Nordic, a more prudent, careful approach to investment decisions, and excuse me, and are not easily lulled into a nice sales story by a real estate broker. My personal experience, and having gone from client side to advisor side and then back to client side, and people didn't understand why I went from client side to advisor side, but it was the opportunity that was there right there and then when I joined Cushman & Wakefield. But clearly, when you worked as an advisor, in particular somebody like Cushman & Wakefield, or also other large advisors, you have access to data and information almost instantly. Which is amazing, and that obviously enables you to guide and advise clients such as investors, but also developers. And when you are then on the other side, the client side, you are much more dependent on seeking that information, that data from people like the Cushmans and the CBs. So that is really, I think, the biggest difference. I think in leadership style, I mean, my personal style has not changed at all, regardless of which company I have worked for. It's more adjusting to what are the expectations and requirements in terms of reporting and delivery of results.
And you mentioned on the advisory side, there's a lot more revenue pressure.
Yes.
And obviously, as a leader within a capital markets team, you're looking at your team and you're looking at individual and you're saying, guys, we're in third quarter, and some of you aren't performing as well as I would hope. So that's a different type of pressure that you're obviously having to work with those guys to make your targets or make your goals at the end of the year, and I'm assuming then that type of pressure is not really present on the investor side, or maybe it's a different type of.
It's a different type of pressure, because the pressure for the investor is actually to deploy capital. I mean, first of all, to raise the capital, which for some investors that's through retail channels, and for investors like us, it's through LPs. But that is first and foremost the starting point and the most important thing. But then comes the next type of pressure, which is you need to deploy it within a certain period of time, because as long as it sits on a bank account, it does nothing for you or for your investor, your LP. So it's a different type of pressure, and that then transforms into making the right investments, making the right decisions that look good now, but also look good when an exit comes further down the road. And that is probably the biggest challenge, especially also in a market that we have experienced over the past 24 months, where it has been difficult as an investor to find the right type of investments. There's been plenty of opportunities, but what yield do you put at the exit? That's the big question mark. That's been a big challenge, literally, for everybody. And that's probably also one of the reasons why we have seen, I mean, apart from macroeconomics, one of the many reasons why the sort of investment and transaction activity has been much lower over the past 24 months.
Okay, so let's change gear a little bit. So let's kind of look at your whole kind of I suppose probably 28 years of career. So has there been any occasion within your career, or maybe even in from a personal experience, have you experienced any kind of setback that's kind of propelled you on then to which you felt had impacted your growth at the time, but later on then you look back on it and you think, well, that was actually a bit of a blessing in disguise, because now I feel like I've learned from that, and I'm a stronger person than I was before then.
Yeah, I like that question, Mark. And there's been a couple of experiences. I mean, generally, I'm not a person who spent my time looking in the rear mirror and having regrets about what happened, and because what happened you cannot change today. But it is fair to say that in hindsight, I feel that I spent a good 10 years in the airline industry, and having had the great opportunity to work in other industries in my career, I feel that had I made that shift earlier, maybe I would have explored more or different type of opportunities in those other sectors, and perhaps in particular the real estate sector, which I truly enjoy working in. So that is one thing, that maybe that shift came after a too long time in one industry. And another experience has been my decision to leave the banking industry, but I don't regret that today. Make no mistake about that. But I then jumped into a real estate startup at the beginning of 2008, not knowing much about the real estate industry, and actually not having my eyes open to what's happening and what are the warning signals in the rest of the world. So joining a real estate startup that was funded by high net worth individuals in the beginning of 2008 was very fun. It was like a true entrepreneurial experience, which I haven't had before. And then fast forward 9 months came September 2008, where the whole world came to a stop. And so did the activities of that business. And shortly into the following year, 2009, I left that company. I was their finance director, and I couldn't even pay my own salary. So that was not the greatest experience in terms of timing and what have you. But I don't regret that, because that actually became a stepstone into the real estate industry. And shortly after, I had the opportunity to join Aberdeen. And the rest is kind of history.
Brilliant. Okay, so looking at as I said, all of that experience, would you have any advice for, say, 25, 26-year-olds starting their career in real estate in Poland today? Like, would you have just one bit of advice for them that you would say, this is my elderly wisdom?
Elderly wisdom, maybe not so much Soren's wisdom, but the maybe a bit of wisdom that I have been given on my journey, which is always be curious, never be afraid to ask, never be afraid to be critical towards information that you receive, and have that hunger for learning. Don't think that working from home is a great freedom, because when you are at that stage in your career, you actually need to learn from more experienced people, and you will actually help progressing your career and your learning curve by coming into the office or coming into wherever you go to meet other people and learn from more experienced people. And in particular in our industry, real estate, a lot of the greatest deals, whether it's leasing or transactions, happen through people meeting people and interacting with each other. So if you are an introvert, work on that, because getting out of the introvert box, and I actually was an introvert when I was a kid, can be a hindrance to further grow in this industry.
I think I had an analysis done a couple of years ago, and it described me as an introverted extrovert, and which basically means you do something like you're naturally introverted, but then you're put in positions where you're and particularly in a kind of in a business development type of position or networking type of position where you almost have to turn it on. So it's almost fake it until you make it, and it's a crucial thing.
I think social interaction is one of the most important thing for human beings. And to quote one of my colleagues from previous colleagues from Cushman & Wakefield, who was running Central and Eastern Europe, he always said every touch point is an opportunity for one or another. Maybe a business opportunity, maybe another opportunity, maybe it'll be something that comes back later. And I think that's a great way of putting it. Human interaction is what is creating opportunities and everything that we are creating in the world. Yeah,
no, absolutely. So let's get inside your head a little bit. Let's do that.
Are you sure you want to go there?
One thing I'm kind of curious about, and I have this, and this is kind of centered around, your well-being, your mental well-being, your mindfulness. Is there any place that you've visited in the past that you like to kind of mentally return to, just to kind of calm yourself and relive that experience that you've had?
Yes. Yeah, there is actually such a place, and as a matter of fact, I'm going there tomorrow.
Right.
Not that I really need to sort of relax and calm myself down after the holiday period, but Rome is such a place, and I read a lot about ancient Rome back in high school through history or through Latin texts that I was studying, and became really curious about ancient Rome. And my wife and I it's probably the destination my wife and I have been traveling to the most over the past 10 years. I love Rome, and there's a particular place in Rome called Forum Romanum, which is the place where Romans used to meet and to discuss and debate. It was like a central meeting point, and today is part of what I call sort of the greatest open-air museum in the world, which is the central part of Rome. And I feel that I'm walking among ghosts when I visit that place. And that is a place that's kind of, it just has a really weird influence on me, but and my well-being, and therefore, Rome is a place that I like to come back and visit. Partially because of that, the whole history, and it has also been one of the starting points for what else happened in Europe and in Europe's history. So it has a very special place in my heart.
I get that as well, and like you, I'm a classical history nerd, and we were in Greece last week with the family, and I dragged the family on a 3-hour drive just to visit the seat of. We were in northern Greece, so we went up into Macedonia.
Yes.
So we visited the palace of Alexander the Great. Yes. Actually, his father built it, Philip II. And for me, it was just like I was standing there going, I can't believe I'm standing here where these amazing people, like Philip II was also an amazing person, doesn't get enough credit for everything that he did. But just to stand in those places and kind of, time travel back to, 2,500 years ago to, 336 BC and I was saying to my youngest, and I was saying, imagine what this was like in 336 BC. And they were like, my youngest was like, BC? Is that before Cristiano Ronaldo? I was like, right, okay.
Yeah, a bit before that.
Another thing I'm kind of curious about, and I think the Scandinavians is really, really well in terms of kind of looking after your mental health, and in terms of avoiding burnout, have you any tips or tricks for avoiding burnout?
Interestingly, I touched on this topic during one of the recent mentoring sessions. I'm a mentor, and my mentee is a young legal professional who works here in Warsaw, who also was struggling a little bit with that. One of the 3 topics we were touching on that we wanted to deal with is work-life balance, and attached to that, how to deal with stress. And I gave her, because she asked for advice, I gave her the advice that you need to compartmentalize what you're stressed about, and the box that covers topics and problems and challenges that you cannot influence, you need to spend much less time on that. Perhaps no time at all, because everything that you cannot influence or you cannot change yourself, spending stress and negative thoughts about that's going to influence on your whole life and also how you act with your family, your friends, and of course at work. So compartmentalizing challenges and stress factors at work and basically also at home is a great help to actually stay focused and addressing the challenges that you can actually do something about, that you can actually influence. And that is that is one thing that I over time have actually excelled at, and also why it's extremely rare that I get stressed at work. And another thing is to find something that puts you at ease when you have some free time or from work. When I was younger, that was to go fishing, which just took my mind away from everything else.
Well, I was going.
And what I do now is actually, I love to cook, and attached to that, I started 2 years ago to make my own bread.
Great.
And this thing about making your own bread is a very fulfilling thing.
I
and
love
it's
it.
And it kind of just like it takes me 2 days to make a sourdough bread, and so I'm starting on Friday to have it ready for Sunday. but it's just like I found that it's something that just like it just helps me to relax and stay calm.
Absolutely. No, I have my grandmother's recipe for Irish soda bread.
Yes,
It's just fantastic. I just absolutely love it. So, as an extension of that, I think at times we do need to be a little bit selfish, and we need to find activities, and they don't have to be stressful activities or engaging activities, but just away from work, away from the family, and just for you.
Yes.
So is there anything out there that you just dedicate for you? This is my time, this is me time, I'm doing this for the next hour or whatever, and that's
perhaps yes. I think it's probably three different things, which is getting on my bicycle, and I'm generally a solo rider, and getting out and ride for a couple of hours on my own is something that I hugely enjoy doing. Not that I wouldn't bicycle with other people, and there's been plenty of opportunities to do so. There's like a real estate bicycle team in Warsaw, but that is something that I quite enjoy doing. And another thing is to basically bury myself in a book, which I also like. And then there has to be no music and no noise around. I don't mind that somebody else is sitting on the sofa next to me also reading, but once I get into a book, I really just like to sort of close off everything around me and just be into that book. And that is a way to for me to sort of.
So what have you read recently that's been interesting for you?
I probably read more fiction than nonfiction, but a nonfiction book that I read I think about a year ago, and that I really, really enjoyed, is a book called Shoe Dog. It's written by Phil Knight, who is the founder of Nike, or Nike.
Yes.
And it's the story about how Nike became Nike. And it's a story about entrepreneurship.
Was there a movie about that? Was there a Nike movie out recently?
I am not sure. If there was, I haven't seen it.
Or maybe it's coming out.
Yeah, but that is it's an amazing journey, and everything from how he started out by importing running shoes from Japan to starting to produce himself, or setting up own factories in United States, to move into supplying sports gear to Michael Jordan, who actually didn't want to meet with him in the beginning, and we know today the rest is history. How Nike became a brand in golfing. It's very, very amazing, and he's always been a very anonymous person in corporate life. At the end of the book, he tells a story about when the journalist comes up to him, he's having a chat with Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, and it's like, oh, hi Bill, and hi Warren, and hello you, and Phil writes that he didn't recognize me at all, and that is the way it's supposed to be. So that is a very, very good book, and certainly is a book that I would recommend to a lot of people to read if they like to learn the story about a brand that everybody knows on the planet, but not many people know the story behind it.
Speaking of sports brands, and I know you're a big Manchester United fan, and that cannot be good for your mental health in the last couple of years. Sorry to say.
It's been hard.
But maybe better times ahead.
Maybe. Yes, I'm a devoted Manchester United fan, and I'm also a club member. And I have been over to watch games, and now and then. My best mate in Warsaw, who is also Danish, is also a devoted Manchester United fan, and as you would expect, we have conditioned our sons in the same direction, and it's been difficult to motivate them over the past at least 5 years. But yes, that is true. And but then I have a lot of my best friends back in Denmark. They are all Liverpool supporters, and my brother supports Arsenal. So it is, it's been a kind of a hardship.
Well, I know, because I'm an Arsenal fan, and so the last 20 years have not been very kind to us. But looks like we're. it looks so good. We're getting there
Yes,
finally, which
yes.
is good. So, Soren, listen, this has been brilliant. We could do this for another hour, but I think the people at home are kind of getting a bit bored of us at this stage.
Yes, absolutely.
But maybe we'll continue off camera. Listen, thanks a million. This has been brilliant, and thank you for sharing as well. It's very kind of you. So great. And,
thank you for inviting me.
No
I enjoyed
problem.
this.
We'll catch you up soon.
Absolutely.
All right, take care.
All the best.